was born in 1945 on Fuller Avenue in Dale and Rondo neighborhood. I've continued for years to have friends in the Rondo neighborhood, mostly through basketball connections. Frank White, who you maybe know, is someone I've known since high school. He's very involved in the Rondo neighborhood. In fact, he's just going to come out with a book of black baseball in Minnesota. So one time I just saw a little piece in the paper that someone was going to do an oral history of the Rondo neighborhood and was looking for volunteers. So I responded to the ad, and it was a woman that lived in St. Paul. And she offered me various things, and one of the things that I was interested in was doing a map. She said, we need a map. I need a map for the book. So I said, well, I'll do that. And she sent me to someone at the University of Minnesota by the name of David Taylor, who was at that time the dean of what was it called, General College, which they've since, I think, eliminated at the U. But he was the dean there, and he had been born the same year I was in the Rondo neighborhood, which was kind of fun. He had started a hand-drawn rudimentary map. He had laid out basically the boundaries as a black man, what the boundaries were for him as a child. There were actual boundaries, and you knew what they were if you were black. If you were white, you probably weren't that aware of them, but they were Lexington Avenue on the north, Marshall Avenue to the south, University Avenue to the north, and downtown was fairly fluid. So kind of generally Rice Street, but downtown was kind of fluid. So he had that, and he just had the streets drawn, and he had a couple of little notes in there. He just said, here, you can have this. And he said, I don't have time to do this. You can have this. So I took that, and I just kind of ran with it, and I spent like the next 2 years at least doing research to create this map. I spent probably 100 hours interviewing Rondo people. I'd go to the Rondo old timers meetings. I was double and triple checking all the information. I read every single issue at the Historical Society of the St. Paul Echo, which was the Rondo area newspaper. I don't remember his name, but it was the Wilkins Auditorium. Was that Roger Wilkins? His brother was the editor, and he was a brilliant writer. He was an incredible writer, but he died when he was like 30 years old. But he was the editor of this newspaper called the St. Paul Echo, so I read all of those articles. I would make notes. I would notice what was at certain addresses. I had all the addresses, and I'd just keep filling them in. And then I went through all of the directories at the various libraries. The most complete ones were at the St. Paul Library, not at this Historical Society. Theirs were missing things. And eventually, then, when I got all that information, then I started going around interviewing people and checking everything I had and getting background stories on all of the information I'd gathered. About the boundaries. I had a woman tell me that one time she walked across University Avenue. She was standing on the other side to do some shopping, and a policeman came up and said, "What are you doing here? You don't belong on this side of University Avenue." That's how things were. Eventually, I got in a dispute with this woman. She wanted to eliminate everything from the map that wasn't about black history or about black culture in the Rondo neighborhood, and I refused to do that because I was from that neighborhood, and I knew this neighborhood was an integrated neighborhood that worked really well. My grandparents, who lived my whole life, and we were there a lot in the Rondo neighborhood. We visited them a lot, even after we moved out. They never had a car. They walked everywhere. They did all grocery shopping by walking. They did everything by walking. And I never in my childhood, or ever at any time, ever heard them express the slightest fear of anything. It was a neighborhood that old people could walk around in, and it was a neighborhood of, all their neighbors were black, and And the grocery stores are mostly owned by Jewish people, so Jewish people, everyone was intermingling and everyone got along really well. And so I refused to do that because I said, no, that's not really the history of the Rondo neighborhood. It became that slowly after the suburbs with the GI Bill after World War II, when two of my uncles who lived in that neighborhood with their wives and starting families, they left and went and built their own homes in North St. Paul. That was the American dream, go and build your own home. They had, what happened was, I think white people with the GI Bill and with their jobs had the ability to do that. Black people still couldn't leave that area until civil rights. So it became more black after that. I had this map, I'm hand drawing it. I drew it many times, that map, by hand, over and over. I'd draw it, I'd fill in new things, I'd have to change things, I'd get things wrong, I'd interview people. David Taylor had it upside down. He had, like all maps, north are at the top. He had north at the bottom and south at the top. So I kept recreating his map, and I realized I just can't have it like this. So I had to turn the whole thing upside down, which was a huge amount of work to do, and redraw the whole thing. Eventually I was at the point where I needed a graphic designer to help me. And I hired some guy in Duluth. I did a lot of research on somebody. I hired someone in Duluth. And he was very good, but something went on in his life. I don't know what it was, but he just didn't get anything done. And finally I had to fire him. And then I found another guy in Minneapolis who actually did the actual professional layout as you see it on that map. I had another friend to help me with the colors, and she was a graphic designer, and so that's how the map came about. That's the story of it. Well, I think if you have a community that really works well, the memories of that community are pretty valuable. So I get a little choked up about it because people have really appreciated it. I've gotten, especially the black community has given me lots of fabulous feedback, and I'm a little humbled by that. No one else had done it, and things were disappearing. The stories were disappearing. People can look at there and say, oh, we were there, and this happened on that corner, or whatever. The freeway came through, 94 came through, and took out Rondo Avenue. That was the end of the community. It couldn't recover from that, plus almost at the same time civil rights happened. And there was a strata of people who then could move out. I can't think of his first name, but the former police captain, the first black police captain, Griffith. He moved out. I was to his house and interviewed him. He moved out right near Roseville, and loved it out there. He said, we'd have never been able to do this without civil rights or without the money that the city gave us for our house. He said they gave us way more than it was worth, he thought. Other people say they got cheated on it. But if you hear all the stories, there's, it's a community. Everyone thinks this way or that way. There are disagreements. Some people think, wow, it was great. Some people think, oh God, I was glad to get out of there, or whatever. That's what makes a community. There's not a uniformity of ideas or opinions or anything. So I think the map, also in a sense, shows that. It's even in that community, there was something called, what was it, Cornmeal Valley and Oatmeal Hill. Well, oatmeal costs more than cornmeal. The further you got from downtown towards Lexington, the more affluent you were. It took more money to live near Lexington. When I was a kid, around the Capitol, there were still dirt streets, and there were outhouses. So that was Cornmeal Valley. So officially, the dividing line was either Dale or Western Avenue, but people would fudge that because everyone liked to say they lived on Oatmeal Hill. So you could get away with living 3 blocks or 4 blocks or something into Cornmeal Valley and still like present yourself as living on Cornmeal Hill or Oatmeal Hill. So like I say, it was a community. All those things went on. When I was a kid, my grandparents' was an amazing place. This whole block brownstone building it was on Central Avenue from Dale, was it Dale to Kent, I think, or maybe on the other side. It amazed me as a kid that if you walked in, to get around the backyard, if you're in the front, you either had to go through the house or all the way around the block. There was no other way to do it. It was kind of like weird, you know. And if you walked in the front door and you went to go out the back, you had to go down a huge flight of stairs because the kitchen was a whole story up because there's a big hole in the backyard down to the alley. And their heat was a gas stove in the dining room, and then they just had holes with these, I still remember these metal grates over the floors for the upstairs, and that was the heat for upstairs to go through the metal grates. So it was a lot of really fun memories. I remember just walking down to the store with my uncle or my grandmother or something, the corner store. There's a corner store everywhere, and I don't know, everyone just seemed friendly and everyone seemed to get along. So I think my map represents that in some way, something that doesn't exist anymore, obviously, but it was a community that I think people valued, so there's a nostalgia for it. And I think the map feeds into that nostalgia.